These odd mysteries remain unsolved despite countless man-hours from police and private investigators. Number 5. When cybersecurity expert Arjan Compage disappeared while on holiday in Norway, the mystery made headlines around the world. Years later, many people believe the mystery is still unresolved. Arjan was a Dutch national and one of the most respected people in his field. He specialized in cybersecurity for investigative journalists and had worked with everyone from Reuters to WikiLeaks. He kept in contact with former employees of national security agencies and hackers to stay up to date with the latest news and techniques, and spoke out against proposals for e-voting. In August of 2018, he left the Netherlands for a holiday in Norway. Shortly before leaving, he purchased a foldable canoe and told the seller he planned on taking it to the fjords. He stayed in the city of Bodo for a while checking out of his hotel on August 20th. This was the last time anybody saw Arjan. He kept friends back in the Netherlands up to date with his plans while he was away. He was planning on taking a 10-hour train journey to the city of Trondheim. It was from there that he booked a flight from Amsterdam on August 22nd. He never caught the train to Trondheim, nor did he make his flight back to Amsterdam. It was after he failed to arrive home in the Netherlands that the police got involved. Police believed he had taken a train from Bodo to Roggen, a much shorter journey of just under 90 minutes. It's not clear if that was the first leg of a planned journey to Trondheim, as the train would have passed through Roggen, or if he had chosen to travel to Roggen instead of Trondheim for some reason. A few weeks after he had vanished, fishermen found his belongings, including his ID, floating in the water around 50 kilometers from Bodo. His cell phones were not among his belongings, nor was his canoe or any sign of what had happened. The following day, police announced they had pulled the canoe from the water, and it had a hole in the hull. At this point, they were working with 3 possibilities. An accident, Arjan had intentionally disappeared, or he was the victim of foul play. WikiLeaks was quick to share the story and conspiracy theories about a government abduction, or that he had been on a secret mission for the organization. But it didn't help that Bodo is home to a Norwegian military airbase, which played a major role in the country's cyber defense operations. 10 days after he went missing, his cell phone was activated for a short period of time. Then the SIM card was switched out for a German one. This only caused more speculation. After a year-long investigation, police announced that the phone had been used by lorry drivers in Eastern Europe, who had simply taken it. They weren't involved in his disappearance. Given how long it took to reveal this information, some people believed this was part of a cover-up, as police wanted to close the investigation. Sure enough, police concluded that Arjan had likely ended up in the water while canoeing, and his body had been washed out to sea. The explanation still raises questions. According to his friends, he was not a risk-taker, and wouldn't have done something like this without a friend. Others have questioned why he would have gone canoeing with all of his luggage after checking out of the hotel. He was 47 years old at the time of his disappearance, 5 foot 8 inches tall, with long blonde hair and glasses. Number 4. Just after midnight on September 9th, 2009, Irina Sofanova returned to the building where she lived after a date with her boyfriend. The boyfriend, Alexander Shurikin, had picked her up from her place of work the evening before and dropped her off outside the apartment building. A few hours later, one of Irina's neighbors got into the elevator in the building, accidentally kicking a newspaper that was lying on the floor. She discovered a set of keys under the newspaper and picked them up. The following day, she put up a sign in the hallway to say she had found the keys. The keys belonged to Irina, who hadn't been seen since the night before. Irina lived with her son and younger brother in a flat in southern Russia. Her sister lived in the same apartment building. They realized she was missing in the morning when Alexander called Irina to wish her a good morning. He tried her cell phone, and when she didn't answer, he called her landline. Irina's son said she hadn't returned from the cinema yet, which sent off alarm bells as Alexander knew she would have been home by now. Irina's friends and family began to search for her, covering the local area with flyers asking for information. It was believed Irina had picked up a newspaper on her way into the building, gotten into an elevator, then disappeared. However, nobody actually saw this happen, and it's possible she could have been taken before she even went inside. Alexander became the prime suspect as he was the last person to have seen her, but there was no evidence linking him to her disappearance. Likewise, her estranged husband was also a suspect, but he lived in Moscow at the time she went missing, and there was again no evidence. As there were no security cameras in or around the building, it seems likely the mystery will remain unsolved for the foreseeable future, unless someone comes forward with an explanation. Police do not believe she disappeared of her own accord, and they do suspect foul play. Since becoming an adult, Irina's son has spoken about discovering his mother was a missing person, in the hopes it might convince the person responsible to come clean. Number 3. Matthew Danielenfeld was last seen fleeing a grocery store in Thurston County, Washington, on February 28, 2019. He was in the middle of what appeared to be a mental breakdown, telling the store workers that someone had taken the lives of his entire family. When the store workers tried to contact police, he ran and hasn't been seen since. Matthew's erratic behavior had started earlier that day. He had spent the day bowling with his sister, then returned with her to his parents' home. His sister was in her bedroom, located on the other side of the garage to the rest of the house, and Matthew told her he was going to fetch his phone from the main house. He never came back. Instead, he seemed to go to a neighbor and told them someone was after him and they had taken the lives of his family. The neighbor obviously called police, but as would be the case later on, he didn't stay much longer. Matthew jumped a fence and ran into traffic. It doesn't seem like he had been hit, and he ran 2 miles to the grocery store where he was last seen. What could have happened to Matthew and where he ended up after he left the store is an unsolved mystery. Matthew was 20 years old at the time of his disappearance. He had used illegal substances in the past, but his family were working with him to get clean, and it's unknown if he was under the influence of anything when he vanished. He was having money troubles too, but his family didn't know of any borrowing he may have done. A few months before the incident, shortly before Christmas of 2018, Matthew was violently assaulted. He had been walking home after an evening out with a coworker. His phone was dead and he had no means of transportation. As he walked, he noticed 3 men following him. He tried to shake them by entering a store, but they were waiting for him when he left. Matthew was jumped on one of the back roads and was violently beaten. The men eventually fled and Matthew managed to make his way home. He refused to go to the police or to the hospital and said he didn't want to get his family into trouble. At first, he claimed he didn't know the men, but when pushed, he said he didn't owe anyone money. Who the 3 men were and whether they had anything to do with Matthew's disappearance is just another unsolved question. Number 2. Ryan Singleton was on the way to achieving his dream of becoming a model when he mysteriously disappeared in California's Mojave Desert. His body would turn up more than 70 days later, but what exactly happened to him remains unsolved. Ryan was a relatively successful model, having earned a spot on the runway during New York's Fashion Week a few years earlier. In July of 2013, he flew from his mother's home in Atlanta, Georgia to Los Angeles, then hired a car to travel to Las Vegas. While returning from Las Vegas, the car broke down. Ryan began walking down the side of the highway where he was spotted by highway patrol. The officers picked him up and drove up and down the stretch of highway where Ryan believed his car was, but there was no sign of it. Instead, they dropped him off at a nearby gas station where he called a friend to pick him up. By the time the friend arrived, Ryan had disappeared. When the friend returned to Los Angeles, he contacted police to report Ryan missing. An intensive search of an area with a 5-mile radius began. Ryan's car was found a few miles north of where he had told the officers it was. Finally, in September of 2013, Ryan's body was found by hikers 2 miles from where he was last seen. It was an area that authorities had already searched, but it's possible they just missed the body during the initial investigation. His organs were missing, but due to the time that had passed, it was impossible to say what had caused him to pass away. Even if it had been animals responsible for the state of the body, as authorities believed, Ryan's family and friends still believe he met with foul play before that point. The circumstances surrounding Ryan's last day on Earth were mysterious enough, but Ryan had been acting strangely in the months building up to this odd event. He had moved to New York years earlier to pursue his career in modeling. In 2010, he and a group of friends decided to head to Los Angeles. Ryan wanted to move into acting, as well as film production, and the friends were documenting their journey for a planned documentary. About 2.5 years after they left New York, Ryan decided to leave Los Angeles and return to New York. There, he married a celebrity stylist, Keith Brewster, who was twice his age. His mother didn't know Keith and didn't find out about their marriage until it was posted to social media. They were married for a few months before the relationship ended, and Ryan moved back in with his mother in Atlanta. He was acting strangely at this point and told his mother something bad was going to happen to him, and he had hurt a lot of people. His mother never found out what he was talking about or who he had hurt. A few days later, he left for LA for the final time, telling his mother he was trying out for a football team in Las Vegas. On the day he disappeared, Ryan called his mother and her husband. He asked his mother for money, and her husband said he sounded drunk and could be in danger. If something did happen to Ryan, it's impossible to determine whether it was a random attack or something more premeditated. Why he went to Las Vegas in the first place is a mystery, as the football team's story turned out to be false. It's not clear why he would have even left the gas station, as he knew he had a friend on the way. If he didn't want to meet the friend, it's odd that he would have even bothered to call him. Ryan's friends released a documentary in hopes of raising more awareness about his case. Number 1. Between 1984 and 1988, 5 people on the Caribbean island of St. Croix lost their lives in mysterious circumstances. All 5 were the victims of cyanide poisoning. Who took their lives remains an unsolved mystery more than 30 years later. The first victim was a man named Haig Gilby Caesar. Haig was a 38-year-old man who had lived on St. Croix his entire life. Though voodoo was commonly practiced on St. Croix, it wasn't something Haig's wife believed to be real, and she had thought he felt the same way. So when her husband told her that he'd been talking to an Obaya man who told him about evil spirits on their property, she was shocked. Haig had been told there were 3 jars filled with ancient coins buried in a piece of land that they owned. Evil spirits protected the jars, and the mysterious man told Haig they needed protection from the evil spirits in order to get the jars. Haig borrowed $100,000 to give to the man. In return, he received a potion that was supposed to protect him from the evil spirits. His body was found in his car on May 24, 1988. It looked as if he had been run off the road. An autopsy revealed cyanide poisoning was responsible for his passing, and investigators believed the poison had been the so-called potion he had been given. The $100,000 was, of course, missing. 2 years later, a similar series of events occurred. Edsel Stryden and Carmen Torres owned a local bar and were looking to expand. They took out a loan of $54,000, though it isn't clear if that was from an official lender like a bank or someone a bit more mysterious. On September 13, 1986, They left their home at dusk in Edsel's pickup truck. Their daughter watched them leave, not knowing it would be the last time she saw either of them alive. According to the daughter, she saw her father slip a small bottle into his pocket. 3 hours after they left, Carmen was found on the side of the road. She was still alive at this point, but passed away on the way to the hospital. Her husband was found on a nearby beach in his truck. Both were soaked in seawater, and both had passed away due to cyanide poisoning. At this point, it would be easy to brush this off as the couple taking their own lives, unable to repay the loan. Though no sign of the money was ever found, and police suspected foul play, 2 more years passed, and there was again a repeat. Police were called to what they believed was a minor road traffic incident. They found Radha Maharaj at the side of the road, half a mile away from where Carmen had been 2 years earlier, and seriously ill. She had no external injuries, and there was no sign of a struggle. She too passed away on the way to the hospital due to cyanide poisoning. Her husband, Krishnadas, was found 16 miles away on the side of the road, also having passed away due to the same poison. Both were wearing clothes covered in seawater. Like the other people, the Maharajas owned a local business, this time a convenience store. They had taken out a loan to expand but fell into difficulties. Their daughters reported Krishnadas had been receiving strange phone calls for weeks before the disappearance. They borrowed money from Radha's family to pay this mysterious figure. When their daughters asked why, Radha said everything would be clear by Monday. By the time Monday came, she and Krishnadas had already passed away. Police believed all 3 cases were connected, and someone posing as an Obaya man had been tricking the victims into believing he could help them out of financial struggles. The victims didn't seem to be involved in local religions, so it may have been easier to trick them. The person responsible has never been found. The only information authorities have about him is that he has a strong French West Indian accent. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.